And the perfect segue to our next presenter, Adam Apollo, because this is what we're talking about, becoming a world citizen. What happens when we move from the identity of our local city to our county to our country to the fact that we're all citizens of this planet Earth? And that's what the next presenter is going to be presenting with us, Adam Apollo. Adam Apollo is a frequent flyer at Portals Ascension, I'm proud to say, and he has offered insights on global transitions, physics, technology, human spirituality, and the future as a leadership ambassador at the White House, in multiple summits at the United Nations, and at conferences and festivals around the world. After having a vision of the universe as a fractal hologram at the age of 15, he extensively studied a wide variety of branches in theoretical astrophysics, completing major research papers on the potential interface between consciousness and the physics of space-time by the time he graduated high school. He's the founder of the UniFi movement and several educational technology-based companies and organizations, as well as a faculty member and the lead systems architect for several international online academies, including the Residence Academy for Unified Physics from Nassim Haramein, the Guardian Alliance Academy, which is his own academy for self-mastery, where I believe he also teaches Jedi training, and the Visionary Arts Academy. He currently has over 6,000 active students of all ages from around the world, and he's dedicated to achieving a sustainable and thriving interplanetary culture. So let's bring Adam on. Good to see you, brother.
Hey, thanks, Neil. That bio's a little bit old, man.
Oh,
That's
we gotta
the
update it.
Resonance Academy alone has like 150,000 students in it.
Okay, yes, yes. I think was that the email that you just sent me about that too?
It's all right. It's
All right,
okay.
I'll update it next time.
Thank you. I
Good to see you,
appreciate
brother.
it. It's a great intro. And you guys just, essentially put the T-ball right on the stick for me to hit it because I'm going to essentially dive into what I like to call the world game and how we actually can become a galactic civilization and what kind of issues do we need to address in the process of moving from where we are right now as our country structures and our technological structures to a planetary culture and essentially then to an interstellar culture. So I really appreciate you all having me here tonight. I'm really honored. I support deeply this mission of building a embassy on this planet for off-world entities, extraterrestrial beings from around the galaxy. It's extraordinarily important for us to establish diplomatic relationships and contact beyond the individual contacts that so many of us, I'm sure many of those even watching this event, have had. It's time to make this real and official and scientific and important. And I'm going to lay a little bit of groundwork throughout my talk and presentation in order to help facilitate people understanding what it's going to take and what it may look like to make these kinds of planetary transitions. So, if there's no further intro or questions, I'll go ahead and jump in and I'll be presenting some slides.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So, what is this world game that it takes for us to play to become this galactic civilization? Well, at its foundation is the idea of how we get to become an interstellar society and civilization ourselves. What is at the heart of that process? How do we get here to where we're flying an Enterprise starship to different planets, hanging out with different cultures, being stewards of worlds beyond our own? But most importantly, how do we manage and transform our own planet, bringing back a level of sustainability and regenerative culture that allows our cities to become green, our lands to thrive, and our children to grow up in a beautiful and healthy planet for generations to come? We're faced with this kind of crazy challenge when we get into the roots of the energy and the transportation industries. We've been essentially using the same engine for the last 400 years. The latest update to this engine was in 1954, known as the Wankel engine. So, with all of our amazing technological progress across almost every field, why is it that we have not evolved this most fundamental piece of technology that's literally still driving all of our cars? What happened? Well, one of the lenses that we can look at is the sort of technological process of control that happened around the time of Nikola Tesla. Most people don't realize this, but a series of events, starting with JP Morgan suing Tesla and then buying controlling interest in Tesla's patents, followed by a seizure of Tesla's works and classification of those works, and then essentially major parts of his energy work disappearing into secret projects, gives us a little hint about the need to control energy systems and advanced technologies that we find later really becomes a serious issue when events like Scott was talking about happen in Roswell, where you have a crash, you've got extensive amounts of whistleblowers discussing this crash, and we have to really ask the question, why would that be kept secret? Why would a government choose to keep something like this under wraps? Well, right around this time, and Roswell was 1947, in 1938, there was a radio broadcast called War of the Worlds. Many of you might be familiar with movies created from this. And that War of the Worlds broadcast caused a mass panic across the nation. Everyone who heard the broadcast thought that there were extraterrestrials coming down. There was panic. It ended up in the news. There was entire towns that thought they needed to flee and escape. And we can see in this mass reaction that occurs the sort of intensity that the military industrial complex and essentially all of the different groups working on advanced technologies for national security might think, uh-oh, if this knowledge is out there, we're going to create mass panic. And you also have us, of course, rolling right into World War II and lots of secret war technology being built by the Nazis, and this Cold War sort of interest developing right off the bat to protect technology. But of course, the story goes even further back than that. You have economic interests going back to World War I and World War II. The amount of profit that these wars have created is a foundational lens for understanding one of the major reasons why technological control of the planet has been so prominent. And of course, if we look at the average household income, the sort of split in economics between the top 1% and every percentage below that, it's absolutely astounding to see how much that income gap has grown more and more and more through this technological control established over the 1900s. If we look at oil and gas revenue and profit in 2022, the global oil and gas industry earned record income of more than 4 trillion US dollars. PetroChina earns over $11,000 per second. Oil and gas invested only 4% of their money into clean energy technologies. And that is ridiculous because there are so many incredible technologies being developed all over the planet that are clean, are efficient, and have the capacity to change the world in drastic ways. But as Neil pointed out, many of those technologies have been closed down, the patents purchased, individuals have disappeared. In some cases, we know that certain individuals were killed or have died. And this really points to the intensity of the heart of the issue we're facing in creating a massive change of the guard in how we steward our planet. From different water technologies to advanced solar systems, and all the way through to really advanced energy systems and research, there are many different routes that are in play right now and advanced technological work being done to open up the field and free the energy for the people around the world. And this fundamentally changes the power dynamics here on planet Earth. After all, what happens when energy is free? What happens when you can desalinate water in any village or location in any place on the planet? What happens when you no longer need electrical lines for transmission? Every house can sustain its own electricity, every building can sustain its own electricity, and you have the ability to create resources, objects, and channel energy, essentially solving so many of the major world crises overnight. And of course, the funny thing about all of this is that energy is already free. We already know, even back in the time of the 80s when the vacuum catastrophe was a big topic at hand, that the fundamental field of space time is full of energy and that there are no actual closed systems in the universe. When we start to really get into the physics of the structure of space, and I'm not going to go down that road in this talk, but I do in many of my other presentations, we start to be able to understand that by getting in touch with the nature of the structure of space-time itself, we can unlock some specific technologies, not just energy, but two others that, as a trifecta, could form the greatest change we've ever seen happen on Earth in the quickest time imaginable. The two other technologies are quantum replication and superluminal travel. Quantum replication is essentially the idea you see in Star Trek. You want a cup of coffee, you simply type in a little program, and it assembles the atoms and the molecules to create that cup of coffee right in front of you. Now, suddenly, you can replicate gold, silver, metals, objects, diamonds. Once you're assembling structures of matter, resources in themselves no longer contain inherent value. You don't have to mine them out of a planet. That's another, of course, great benefit of this kind of technology. But more importantly, it's actually a change in our understanding of economics. And this economics change is what has already happened throughout the galaxy. These species do not require mining of their worlds in order to develop specialized metal resources for developing certain technologies. They've already figured out that space-time is a geometric energetic lattice and that lattice can be edited, just like any computing system. Also, superluminal travel is a huge deal because if you've freed up resources, you've freed up economy, and you have free energy, imagine what would happen if you could instantaneously travel to anywhere within the galaxy within minutes or seconds or no time at all. You could be in the other side of the planet at any time that you wanted to visit friends. There are no more essentially establishable borders because you can arrive to anywhere on the planet at any time. And this, of course, is deeply concerning for powers that wish to control those borders and the economic boundaries that those borders represent. Now, of course, this also opens up a much bigger picture, a picture of what it looks like to be an interplanetary species, a picture of what it looks like to travel the galaxy, to get to know other worlds, to release the pressure of our growing population on Earth out into the rest of the universe. And so these two technological transitions are a huge deal. And we have to ask ourselves, what would it take for these technologies to be able to succeed? And that includes energy technologies. One of the key principles for that success is a simple idea called open source. When we look at technology from an open source lens and we see what has happened, particularly within the computing and web development industries, we recognize that a massive explosion of value and wealth and resources and capacity happens when we allow the foundations of our technology to be open and free. And this is what is going to be required of these three major technological pieces for planetary transition. Because without that, you create a power vacuum. And the galactic community learned this a long time ago and realized if you create power vacuums between different planets, you're almost always going to end up with conflict. Whereas if you create an interplanetary culture in which all of the most high level technology is open sourced, then everybody evolves and progresses at the same rate and the same speed. Now, this is also extraordinarily important when we start to look at our transportation technology and how we get from here to there in the world. If we kind of review back on the Earth thinking here and consider the transportation costs and technology, the amount of cost it simply takes for us to move our goods and our services and our products around is $9.1 trillion dollars. And that was in 2020. So if we update that amount a little bit, you can imagine the level of difficulty we have just moving things around. Imagine what happens when it becomes almost zero cost to move all of those same objects. This is the sort of rescue line for a lot of these industries and economies and companies who are scared of losing the power of gaining the massive amounts of money that they have gained for so long through oil and gas industries and many of the pervasive military industrial industries around the planet. But hey, if we really want to get to the bigger picture here, we've got to look at the Starship technology approach. How do we get to become an interstellar species? Well, we've built a lot of technologies to get us up into the sky. But every one of those technologies that we've built to take us to space is essentially a propellant based technology. By exploding or pushing something out of the back of one side of a device, we attempt to push ourselves through the fabric of spacetime. Now, as a unified physicist, I can tell you there's huge problems with this because the more you accelerate, the more you're dilating the structure of spacetime. And the more you dilate the structure of spacetime, the more gravity is created, the more g force is created, the more energy it takes to go faster. And so we're left with a space industry that essentially says, hey, sit here on top of this giant explosive rocket device. We're going to blow it up behind you and do your best to hang on as you shoot into the sky. And of course, we've known due to the events that have happened with different rockets here on Earth, Saturn V rocket, for example, that can be extraordinarily dangerous. And in any case, at the best level of technology that we have using this mechanism, if we wanted to get to Alpha Centauri, which is the closest nearby star, it's going to take us about 18,000 years. So this is obviously not a good solution. And the reason it's not a good solution is because that craft is literally pushing against the structure of space. And the more it pushes against the structure of space, the greater the resistance, the greater the space-time wake. And this is why you end up with people and mainstream physicists who say, we'll never make it to another planet, and no species has made it to other planets because when we accelerate, we create this huge problem. But they're not asking the right question. The right question is, what would it look like to travel without propulsion in this way or without acceleration? Now, that might sound like a far-fetched idea, except that we already have technologies. Roger Scheuer and Guido Fetta's M-Drive and Kiné Drive is designed as a simple cone. It has no output, there's no exhaust, there's nothing exploding or coming out the back. It's simply a metal cone bouncing around microwaves, and the energy inside of the structure actually creates propulsion through spacetime. This is because as the light bounces inside of the cone, the structure of space itself is responsive to those light waves bouncing, and that creates a force pressure that drives the movement of the object. Now, this is a huge insight as we move forward in developing future technologies, but it's also just the first glimpse because people like Ronald Mallet from the Chrono Institute has ended up doing an amazing amount of work on things called unidirectional ring lasers. And what they realized is that simply by rotating light in particular ways within a structure, you can cause and create a gravitational force. In other words, light and gravity, light and space-time talk to each other. And from a unified physics lens, what we would just say is that the structure of space is made of light, and that if you move light inside of that structure in a particular way, you have the capacity to control the flow and the development of that light. Now in NASA, we've got guys working on things like the ISS Enterprise, which has come out of Harold White's work. And it's looking at how do we warp space time? How do we contract space in front of us and expand space behind us in order to achieve things like warp drive? And there are also some problems with things like that, in that, the idea of contracting a huge amount of space going out into the distance in front of you and expanding space behind you requires a huge amount of energy and an insane amount of pressure that would be created in the space time structure itself. But there are better solutions. And I do talks that present many of these other solutions. Some of them are on Portal to Ascension with Neil, and you're welcome to explore some of my work in that area. In simple form, one of the things that I've designed is a ring system, which essentially can isolate the space time structure within the craft, separating it from the outside space time around the craft. And then this can be used as a fundamental mechanism for the craft to essentially loosen its hold on the surrounding space-time fabric and be able to jump. So let's look a little bit at what it would take to build a superluminal spacecraft to actually travel to the stars. Well, we talked a lot about energy, and of course, energy is one of the first major keys to doing this right. And there are many people working on different kinds of energy systems. This is my friend Nassim, who has been building a resonator, is one particular energetic approach, but there are many others, as I discussed and presented earlier. The second major piece of a Starship system is life support, being able to bring the right kind of resources, devices, and to be able to construct things to repair that ship on extraordinarily long journeys. Now, what we've come to understand when I talked about replication is that the structure of space is geometric. And that means it may respond to things like cymatics, to molecular sculpting using laser light. And in fact, we're already doing some of this technology through excimer laser LIGA. We're literally building gemstones and minerals one molecule at a time using light itself to do it. So we're not that far from some of these things that I'm talking about. And the really big one, of course, is the gravity drive. And in my theoretical model, essentially you use a laser interference cavity with an upper ring and a lower ring. And by counter rotating those rings, you create a structure in which the light interferes with and interacts with the geometry of the structure of space itself, creating a gravitational envelope around the craft, and thus allowing the craft to move through space time without having any pressure from the force of acceleration. In other words, no G force, as we generally call it. Now, if you want to get across the galaxy, you also got to have an atlas. And there's problems with that too, because stars age. And although every single star has its very specific stellar spectra, we have to deal with the fact that most of the stars we're looking at are already many, many, many years old. They're, 1,000 light years away means we're looking back 1,000 years in time at the star by the time its light reaches us. And so we need something that's more consistent than the aging of normal stars to travel the galaxy. And fortunately, due to the work of people like Paul Laviolette, who's a doctor, he wrote a book called Decoding the Message of the Pulsars and revealed a particular solution to this in which pulsars could be used as navigation beacons. And it turns out that there is a perfect distribution of pulsars all around the galaxy already. It's almost like there were a series of lighthouses put there for the purpose of superluminal travel across the galaxy. Now, in order to do something like that, you're basically just going to triangulate through the frequency and the energy of 3 different pulsars in a distant location. And through that triangulation, you can find the exact energetic energies of that location, translate it to the system that's communicating light waves to space-time, and the object will jump to that location. Now, that's a very brief way to describe what's happening. And again, I won't get into that in too much detail because there's some more important things to discuss here today before I wrap up. And it's not necessarily all the physics of space-time travel. So the fourth or fifth big piece that we want to talk about is communications. We have this amazing technology already working where we are quantum teleporting data and information between the Earth and satellites in different kinds of ways. That is revealing to us that space time is actually a massive web of wormhole networks, that wormholes and entanglement are actually the same thing. And a lot of the leading mainstream physicists right now are getting behind this idea. There is so much more to this because when we get down to our own experience, we start to see the physics that describe that everything that we're experiencing in reality is due to these entanglements between the protons in our body and the protons outside of us. We're in this very direct relationship with the structure of space all around us. And that is super profound because it starts to open up many different ideas about how information can transfer instantaneously between us and people we care about. Most of us know that term as telepathy. And interestingly, it's been proven over and over and over again, whether by Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Group or by any of you out there who are mothers and who have kids and have had the direct experience of the child being outside or being in another room and they hurt themselves and you feel it before you hear anything. You know that it's happening. And so we know and we have experiential proof that we are telepathic beings and that we are in these connections with each other. This starts to open up a little bit of a different world. This is the world where many of us have learned to develop the ability to communicate with extraterrestrial beings on other planets. Why would we use telepathy to do it, though? Why wouldn't we just pick up a phone or send a radio wave to talk to them? The answer is that in order for a radio wave to reach a star system that's 400 and something light years away, like the Pleiades, for example, it's going to take 400 years to send the message there and 400 years to send the message back. So we need a faster communication system. And it may be that our own bodies already have this advanced technology built in where we develop these capacities. And of course, that leads us down this rabbit hole of a much deeper conversation about how spirituality is, in fact, a critical part of the development of a species as they come into stewardship of their planet. It's not that we need to all get wooey and go 5D and pretend that we're going to evaporate from the physical world. It's actually about taking stewardship and management of our world and the physical structures within it through a higher perspective of how we are stewards, how we can serve all life for all time to come. Now, an advanced galactic society is already going to have developed this capacity because if you want to travel faster than light, you're probably externalizing some level of telepathic and astral travel capabilities. The ability to remote view to another world, telepathically communicate with coordinators around that planet, and then jump your ship to that location. And of course, you don't have to do all of this through some deep form of meditation. Your technology can augment it the same way as our phone augments our ability to telepathically communicate through talking to each other onto other sides of the planet. Now, spirituality also leads to deeper understandings about interstellar diplomacy. What does it mean to have universal translation between societies and cultures? What does it mean to have stewardship over worlds that are not quite developed enough yet to become part of this galactic community? And along the way, as you can probably imagine, it seems that many galactic species have had to learn a lot of lessons about that because we've had periods right here on Earth at different points in history where there was perhaps not a prime directive limiting the influence of the extraterrestrial species here in their interactions with people on Earth. And that may have caused some serious problems. And so everyone everywhere, as you can imagine, is growing up and learning and developing. But it's also not just so simple to say, hey, we'll all just, get enlightened and we'll just do this and we'll become this galactic species. Because one of the greatest challenges we have right now is actually getting on the same page with the information that is being shared. I'm sure many of you out there have had the experience of getting in touch with certain new ideas, so to speak, that are actually very old ideas and that unfortunately lead us down the wrong trail in terms of what's really going on in our world, like that the earth is flat, or that, say, between 1750 and 1850, there was a super advanced civilization called Tartaria that went through a massive reset. These things lead us away from the truth trail of our own direct experience. And I want to illustrate for you what the kind of larger scope of this looks like. We can see things like the social dilemma and the work of Meta in their processes of getting us towards this world where something like Ready Player One is real. Well, the fascinating thing about Ready Player One and this virtual metaverse world that we see, and by the way, I'm a CEO of a tech company, so this is my wheelhouse and my world, and I'm going to share with you a lot more of what we're doing in that space. But is this the world that you guys want? I mean, do you really want to spend your life, in some VR as the interesting place to be because the world itself is falling apart? No, we have to make a deeper level change in stewardship of our information, of our consciousness, and that means how we interact with our communications technology. And I like to ask this question: what if the metaverse could support planetary stewardship? What if these advancements in technology and gaming can actually create a rapid development of planetary visualization technology that drives regenerative social, environmental, and economic impact? And this is where the world game really comes into play. And so I've been building this system for many years now. It's about 10 years in the theory and the work and a lot of the open source prototyping development. But now we're actually building this full system stack that is a planetary operating system. And this operating system works like an educational hub where you can take free courses, learn things, go through gamification processes, join missions, and essentially make real world impact in the world and track that real world impact so that we can actually see the changes that we're making and the difference that we're making in our lives by participating in just simple things like selling our music, creating our stuff, doing all the stuff we're already doing right now, but driving that work towards regenerative impact. And we created a regenerative economic model around all of this, where a partner of ours, like UniFi, which I co founded back in 2012, does a massive global campaign for World Water Day. And you have someone sell a piece of art in order to support World Water Day. With our economic system, it lets us split royalties to that seller, to that community, and they can give whatever percent they want into the Water Impact Fund. Once that money ends up in that Water Impact Fund, you've got points that that seller earns and points that the buyer earns. And suddenly, now you have a galvanized way where anyone creating any kind of digital product or media or online sale, and by the way, it's $1 trillion industry of people selling digital products these days. Now, money from every one of those sales is going into these impact funds. And you've got people that are doing the buying and the selling earning points along the way. But instead of that money just sitting there, what we do is we translate those impact funds into bounties. Those bounties get attached to missions. And now you've got kids in high school, college, people that do Uber, TaskRabbit, and Lyft. And instead of driving a car around or instead of cleaning someone's toilet, they're becoming bounty hunters, joining missions where they then go and clean up a river, for example, with a group of people in real life, take some photos afterwards. Yeah, look what we just did. Awesome. And as soon as they do that, they upload those photos, they get paid, they earn badges, and they earn points. We're essentially creating a new kind of impact marketplace, an Amazon scale marketplace for impact jobs, where we can actually channel global impact funds, not just from ourselves, but from $1 billion to $1 trillion impact funds that are being created right now to the real work that real people are doing on the ground, instead of into a black box like the Red Cross, where you don't see what's happening, instead of into all of these large charities that nobody really trusts anymore. And now we create massive economy, massive job opportunities, massive vocation. And what we're actually doing, by the way, is basically building Starfleet. We create programs for the youth to become creative leaders and ambassadors in making these changes and earning points and badges that are appropriate for their age groups. Once they get into college, they get a little more advanced, like, the SHIELD group out of Marvel, where they become an advanced strategic command, enabling noble directives, doing real world work in the world. And then as they become older and join, people that are my age, they become part of a league, of a sophisticated network of business and project leaders, earning points and gaining credibility and gaining recognition and building their responsibility by building their networks with each other. And essentially, we just change the entire social game overnight. We say, look, who cares how many followers you have? What I actually care about is how many trees you've planted, how many photovoltaic systems have been installed or rivers have been cleaned up. Maybe not even because you went and did it, but because you created and you gave to that. And in that way, we can support the kids that are into the gaming and the metaverses. One of our partners has 5 people from Marvel on their team. And they're saying, well, what would happen if we incentivized kids to clean up rivers or beaches by, if they do, let's say, 10 beach cleanups, they can earn an Aquaman style suit for their virtual avatar. Perhaps they'll even learn real physical skills. They'll develop real world products and projects. And now you're incentivizing the youth and the kids to move far beyond this sort of I'm in my computer game world into I'm in the real world and I am a planetary steward, shifting this whole dopamine hit game of how cool am I to a new level of mission metrics that say, actually, how much change am I making? How much of a leader am I? How much of a planetary steward can I be? Can I be a superhero for the future of the world? Can I make impact? And when I mention river cleanups and beach cleanups, these are just two different kinds of projects, all in the water sector. But we have projects in land and air and fire and life, projects in communications and education, health and food, justice and principles. We're interested in whole sector change, changing the way that we actually approach planetary stewardship at the most fundamental levels, where we start to see that all systems are interconnected, that everything that we do makes a difference and makes an impact. And I believe it's very possible that we can take a very small amount of the networks that we already have. UniFi, for example, reaches 100 million people per month. If we take 8 million of those people, turn that into revenue where those people are earning money from each other and buying and selling goods online, and they're donating to impact, we can very quickly turn that into millions of paid days of impact, where people are actually making a really good living and a really good income by being planetary stewards, by joining this sort of distributed Starfleet. And of course, the technology is just going to get better. Right now, we're stuck in these screens, but everything that we're building is towards where I just put on a pair of glasses. There is no blue background in this screen, and I can just pull up my dashboards. I can see my communication systems. I can search and sort based on groups of people that I'm interacting with. I can collect different ideas and different knowledge very quickly. I can create different kinds of digital media products, courses, music, videos, etc. And of course, I can travel around and get to know other people's work, as those people are actually star systems with planets of content around them and all different kinds of data. And so this is a very big project I've been working on for a long time. And what we believe is that it's possible right now to disrupt this entire social industry game that's throttling people, stealing from them, essentially using them as data control, and develop instead a sort of planetary dashboard that we're all a part of, that we're connected around, where we're in a different kind of game, a game that's actually about restoring our world, a game that's actually about harmonizing and balancing the biospheres of our planet, a game that's about getting to know who we truly are and maybe the worlds that we came from before we came here. And how can we get to know with lucidity and clarity the truth about who we are, the truth about our history, by leveraging trust, by leveraging an ability to sort through false information and actually get right down to the heart of what is true and what is good and what is real. And I believe through that pathway, we can become an amazing galactic culture. We can see Star Trek's, academies become real. We can have flying cars to travel to other worlds. We can go out into the atmosphere and really see our beautiful spherical planet, each of us individually, not for just the first time, but for the first of many, many times. And we can go to other worlds and meet other species and other cultures and learn from those cultures. How did they learn to master their planet? How did they learn to change the structure of their entire planet to be supportive of life for all the generations to come? Can we become humble again and learn that we're not the smartest people out there? We're not the lead species that gets everything while everything else is animals. That in fact, maybe we're beginners. We're like teenagers in the galactic family. So I invite you to come and explore our project. It's called Core Nexus. You're free to go to corenexus.is or take a picture of the QR code on your screen if that's available to you. And really appreciate your time and for letting me have this presentation. Here's how you can reach me in my work. Thank you all so very much.
Beautiful, brother. You are definitely from a planet with very advanced technology. Seriously, man. You're like bringing it to Earth. You're taking us evolutionary into this next phase because that ability, that coding, the programming techniques, all there, but we're keeping it so archaic, you know?
Thank you.
And you're really taking it to the next level, brother. So thank you
Mm.
so much for everything you're doing.
It's an honor and
Appreciate you.
pleasure, gentlemen. Keep up the amazing work. And I'm with you. I support you. Let's do this. I can see the planet that we're creating together. Thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you, man. Let's do it. All right. Take care, brother.
Thank you. Good night.